you joining us. Each in their own way, these gentlemen are dedicated to you receiving and keeping your veterans benefits and programs that you so diligently earn through your service to our country. Rafael Lozano from your Washington State Department of Veteran Affairs will be providing an overview of the agency's programs and services to include county state veterans benefits. Rafael is a Desert Storm veteran who retired from the United States Air Force in June of 1995 with the rank of Master Sergeant. And he has overseen Veterans Affairs in multiple public positions, including Evergreen College and the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs, first as the Olympia Office Service Center manager, and more recently as Outreach and Community Partnerships for the Washington Department of Veterans Affairs. And from AARP's Fraud Watch Network, we have two distinguished speakers. Paul Frost was a field artillery officer in the U.S. Army via an ROTC commission. He's currently State of Washington Director of Employer Outreach for ESGR, which is a support organization for the Reserve and Washington State National Guard programs. Paul does volunteer counseling with the VA and has been an AARP volunteer for 3 years. Our second AARP speaker is Dave Morrow. Dave has almost 40 years experience in cybersecurity, investigations, and incidents response. In a wide-ranging military career, Dave has served as an enlisted member and officer in the U.S. Air Force from 76 to 98, and as an airman and NCO, he was computer systems operator, and as an officer, he managed and developed computer facilities, was a computer programmer, and spent 12 years as a special agent for the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, specifically in the area of computer-related crime, and retired as head of the Cyber Investigations Division of AFOSI. So AARP research has found that 16% of veterans have lost money to scammers, compared to only 8% of the non-military public. To start us off today, Dave and Paul will go through some examples of scams reported by veterans here in Washington State, so you know what to look for when someone's trying to relieve you of your hard-earned benefits. We'll also share information on how to safeguard yourself from scams and what to do if you or someone you know has been a victim. So with that, Dave, would you like to take us away?
Yep, I sure will. I've still got the chat box slide up. There we go. Okay, good. So hi, everybody. Sorry, we had a little technical thing. I'm Dave Morrow, as Ann said, and welcome to our presentation. Today, we're going to talk about ways that we as veterans are taken advantage of by fraudsters, as well as talk about some of the other things we can do to avoid those things. As Ann said, we are going to have kind of the structure of this is going to be, we're going to talk on the AARP Fraud Watch Network slide for veterans first, and then we're going to turn it over to Rafael, and he'll brief us on what the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs has to offer us as veterans also. And then we'll have a question and answer session at the end to kind of help us address anything in specific that you all have for your questions. So the first thing we want to talk about is AARP's effort. Now, we have long been operating in the realm of fraud and anti-fraud and fraud education. We started in 2015-ish, 2015, 2016, when we teamed up with, to operate in the veterans area, when we teamed up with the United States Postal Inspection Service, the post office, and generated Operation Protect Veterans to help veterans specifically avoid those types of frauds that are aimed at us, as well as those types of frauds that are aimed at the general public. So the first question I get a lot of times is, why is the AARP even involved in this? Well, first of all, we're a very large organization with a lot of people who are veterans. And can we change the slide next? So first of all, we have about 5 million of our members in AARP are current or former U.S. service members. We also find that, and this is taken from a study in 2017, and we just had a study come out the day before yesterday that says the same thing pretty much, that veterans and military families in general are twice as likely as our civilian friends to be targeted by individuals who want to take our money or defraud us in some way. We also found with our survey, the Fraud Watch Network survey that we did, that 80% of us who are veterans or our family members have encountered some sort of veteran or military specific scam in the past few years. So I want to challenge you when we were talking about these scams to think back to yourself and think of what you've seen and types of scams that you've, or the types of situations you've been offered or deals you may have run across because of your veteran status, and look back on those and see, you know, the scam potential for those. As we said earlier, and let's change the slide. Today's agenda is we're going to talk about for Operation Protect Veterans. We're going to go into some detail about some of the scams specifically that are targeting us in the veteran community. And then we're going to move along and tell you how to stay a step ahead of those particular types of scams. If you've heard some of our other Fraud Watch Network presentations, and I urge you to do that, or go to our website, aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork, you'll see there's lots and lots of resources available to the public that will tell you how to get away from these guys, how to get off their radar, or if you come in contact with them, how to operate. They will also talk about some other resources that are available to us as veterans, as well as the general public that AARP makes available. And then we'll have our Q&A at the end with Rafael.
Rogers turned down this wall.
So first of all, some of the things that we see as in terms of scams against the veteran community, this is a list of scams, the data from military veterans, retirees and their families, taken from a tool that the FTC has called Consumer Sentinel. FTC has people all over who are victims of scams, urges them to contact and report to the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC. And by using that data, we can kind of tell what kinds of scams are ascendant, what kinds aren't, what are targeting specific types of populations. And as you can see on this slide, 95,500 of us, the veteran community, reported some sort of dollar loss. And this is from 2016 till today. Most often, those types of things over time were the types of, like, online shopping. You can see is 65% of the people that of the losses were reported from those types of scams, as well as tech support scams. They're always popular types of scams. So the fraud reports we get from the Federal Trade Commission, as well as those we get to our consumer hotline for the Fraud Watch Network, are full of these all the time, whether they're veterans or non-veterans. And the veterans community, though, have the dubious honor of having specific types of scams that will target us. Now, the next slide talks about something that everybody seems to be worried about, and that's identity theft in general. Now, identity theft, as you can tell on the slide, encompasses that term encompasses a lot of different things. Whether it's government benefit frauds, whether it's taking your identity and applying for benefits at the VA or benefits from the Social Security, setting up new accounts on credit cards, or getting a loan using your personal information. One of the big things we saw a huge amount of jump in the reported amount and types of identity theft as a result of the pandemic. So in 2019 and 2020, the military consumers filed 1,455% more reports having to do with identity theft than they had in the previous years. That's 1,500%. And we saw that in the civilian community too. And a lot of that is because there were so many scam type opportunities out there for the fraudsters. We had COVID scams, we had benefit scams where we had all the benefit money and the additional payments that were put into Social Security that were really incented the scammers to try to take identities and to use that information to file for tax returns in other people's names, file for unemployment in other people's names, and to do other types of identity theft. Now, Paul's going to go drill down a little bit more and talk specifically about some of the scams that face us in the veteran community.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. Every time I go through this, I'm absolutely amazed, but only 1% of the population serves the nation in uniform. And yet, military members, active duty and veteran military members and their families are nearly 40% more likely to lose money to scams and fraud than the civilian population. And when you think about that, it really brings home just how targeted veterans and military members are. Additionally, 4 out of 5 military veteran adults were targeted by scams directly related to their military service or the benefits they receive. So we're going to talk a lot today about what's the best defense for that, and it really is education. There's only so much that the government can do to stop the scams and fraud activity. So by educating ourselves and educating our family members, that really is the best way for us to stop it, or at least minimize the amount of fraud that happens. Next slide, please. So it's also important to remember that all of these consumer scams don't apply just to military members and just to the veterans. It also spreads to their spouses, their children, parents, grandparents, and even their family and friends. So what we can do to prepare ourselves is understand that by educating us as to what those scams are and what the fraudulent activity is, that's the best defense against it. Veterans are more likely to experience fraudulent activity than any other group, as we've mentioned, but that also goes for their families. One additional item that has increased our exposure is the COVID pandemic. When you think about our activities today, more of it is done at home. We rarely go to the malls anymore, and we haven't had the out shopping activities that we usually do. So consequently, people are doing their activities from home, and they're using the internet to do it. And that opens us up to more targeted opportunities. When we talk about these, we talk about credit card scams, tech support scams, travel scams. One thing I really want to stress to everybody, these guys are good. They understand and they are prepared to make themselves sound very credible to you. And when they're talking to you, they're going to know just about enough information to make you believe that they're real. Next slide, please. So these are the really veteran-specific scams that we're going to be talking about. And one of them that I find to be particularly difficult is donating money to support fake veterans and military family charities. Donating money is important. We all want to do it. We all want to support, but we have to be careful. Even if it's a legitimate organization, the fact is very little of that money may actually get to the families and the needy people that are the result of the charity. So in most cases, sometimes less than 20% of what you donate actually is used to support the veterans and the military families. So it's important that we do the research before we invest. These scams can also hit family members. I ran across at UW, University of Washington, an issue where family members, students were being called and they said, we have found a way to reduce your tuition and help you with your college bills because a member of your family was a veteran. So we need to verify that you are that member. Can you give us information? Well, of course, the next step is once that's done, the military member all of a sudden starts getting bills that they were not aware of and of course are not real. So identity theft becomes a really important problem. The other one that's become incredibly active is improving terms of your VA loan. Now, what's driven that is a hot real estate market. We're all aware of the fact that the real estate market has just become just a hotbed of activity. And of course, that leads to them now contacting you to either improve your current loan or become your loan provider because you are a veteran. Employment scams have been really ramping up in the state of Washington. Both my son and my daughter-in-law, my son who is a medic, and my daughter-in-law who is a high school teacher, got hit with the employment scams. Fortunately, it didn't include money on their part, but the amount of time they had to take to clean up that activity was just unbelievable. And I think many of us, we all get the discounted back brace, the knee brace, or whatever. So all of these activities that are targeting veterans are not just the veteran member themselves, but also are their families. Also, TRICARE scams, health care scams, anybody that's asking you to pay money up front, just understand and avoid it. Next slide, please. So one thing that many of us, I have received them, and I'm sure many of us have, is the calls that we get from supposedly the Veterans Affairs or a Social Security Administration requesting that you update your information or update your file, or we want to verify that you are still, that you are a veteran and that you are a part of the Social Security network. Anybody that's trying to get personal information or should be checked or really ignored. These agencies are not going to call you on the phone requesting personal information. And if they're asking for any funds or upfront money, that's obviously a signal that says they're not real. And once again, it's probably easier for the veteran to understand, but the information as it's passed on to family, friends, and members of your family can be pretty confusing for them, and they may in fact look at it as being real. Next slide, please. These issues, which are particularly difficult, but these are things that government officials will never, ever do. So when you get that call, understand if any of this is happening, ignore them. Anybody that requests money or your Social Security number through the phone, email, or text, avoid it. Hyperlinks in text and emails that take you to an unofficial or unsecure web page that asks for your personal information. Texting has become a very big tool of fraud and scams. And so don't assume because it's not coming from an email or a phone call that it must be legitimate, because it's probably not. Anybody that requires upfront payment in exchange for health services, immediately avoid them because that's not a real issue. Next slide, please. This is what I'm always pretty embarrassed to talk about because I fell for it. In my particular case, it was my Dd214. Now, anybody that's been in the military understands what a Dd214 is, but there may be members of you out there that don't understand what it is, but it's probably the most important document that a veteran or a member of the military can have because it documents your service. And there are many ways that Dd214 is what justifies you for benefits or things that you are entitled to. Companies will use it to give you veteran status. Agencies may request you get a copy of the Dd214 because before they allow you to participate. So it's incredibly important. I ran into it because I happened to have an opportunity to move to a different company, and I was going to have an interview in a couple of days, and I looked, and all of a sudden I could not find my Dd214. So I fell for the scam that says, we can get you your Dd214 in 24 hours, just pay us several $100s and we'll get it to you. And in the heat of the moment, I'm going, my God, I got the interview, I got to do it. Well, one day later, I still didn't have the Dd214 and they had my money. So don't do that. Anything that you require to get of your service and what you have done and documentation, you can get free of charge. So don't fall for that. The important thing I realize as I get more involved in this, and Dave and I have found this, we used to give these presentations before the pandemic issue in person. And what we found is that these guys are going to try and get you in an emotional state. They're going to try and get you into a state. It's like they want you to do business right now. They don't want to call back. They don't want any delays. And so it's really important that you go slow and think through what the process is. Next slide, please. Dave is going to talk to you a lot. He's one of the real experts that we have on robocalls and solicitations. So I'm gonna, we've all had them and we get a lot of them. So Dave, it's up to you, buddy.
Yeah, everybody hates robocalls, and like so many things in our lives that fraudsters co-opt, there are good things for good points to robocalls, and there are bad points to robocalls. Robocalls have some very legitimate uses. I mean, your doctor's offices call you. I got a couple of texts today from my pharmacy because I'm getting my booster shot this weekend, and they were reminding me. So just because, we can't just outlaw robocalls, because that would be kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. But there's no doubt about it from everybody you talk to that robocalls are the number one question. As Paul says, I deal in the technical scams and in technology type scams. And the question I get most often is, what do we do about robocalls? What do we do about these stupid phone calls that come all night long? And they are a problem. And in 2021, if you just want to kind of get some eye-watering numbers, Americans received over 71 billion calls so far this year in 2021, and the year's not over yet. And the interesting thing about those is that nearly half of those calls are going to, studies have shown in the past that nearly half of those calls are going to be related to some sort of scam in some way or another. So scam calls are often fear-based, and robocalls are often fear-based too. It's either the IRS imposter saying you won't owe back taxes or are going to be arrested, or it's somebody saying they're from the county sheriff's department. We've had that up here in Whatcom County where I live several times this year, where somebody is supposedly from the sheriff's department calling people and saying they're from the sheriff's department and you missed jury duty, and by gosh, if you don't give them go get gift cards and give them $100 in gift cards or $500 in gift cards, you're going to go to jail, but you're just paying your fine, and they accept gift cards. Aren't they great? Well, let me tell you right now, if anybody wants you to pay anything with a gift card, you're online, whether it's a fine or whether it's transferring money back and forth that one of your friends has or whatever, run away, because gift cards, that's not the purpose of gift cards, and gift cards are anybody that calls you and asks you to pay something on a gift card is a scammer by default in my mind. So other scam calls will try to give you free vacations or announce, you just won a huge lottery and you need to press one to talk to an agent, or if it's an email, they'll give you call a certain number back to call. Those types of things you always need to look at any unsolicited phone call with a really jaundiced eye, and really have your antennae up and some red flags going on in your mind about any kind of call like that. Many people I know are very successful at cutting down on robocalls by doing a couple of simple things. One is get into the National Do Not Call Registry. Now everybody says, oh, well, that's not going to, the scammers aren't going to abide by that. Of course they're not. But the legitimate businesses that would give you calls that would be just as annoying, if not, they're just not fraud related, do abide by that, and that will significantly, in some cases, cut down your types of unwanted calls. The second thing you can do is I've known people who will screen their calls with caller ID, even though caller ID can be what we call spoofed or controlled. My personal mantra is, if you don't know who it is, let it go to voicemail. If they really want to talk to you, they'll give you a voicemail. If they don't, just ignore them, even if they're coming from your area code, because there's a technique that scammers use with robocalls called neighborhood spoofing, where they figured out that people are much more liable to pick up the phone and answer a call coming from their area code, because they figure it could be the pharmacy, or it could be a friend, or it could be somebody that they know. So they're very good at being able to have calls come from your area code. So my advice is, have your contacts in your phone, don't answer the phone if they're not one of those known contacts. And even then, if things are fishy, if it doesn't sound like that person, be really, really, really alert. There's other things you can do to opt out of mail. The opt-out pre-screen, the phone number's there, the website's there on the screen is one way you can do it. Another is the Direct Marketing Association has a service at their website, dmachoice.org, which is the organizational lobbying group, if you will, for Direct Marketing Association, and they offer a way to opt out of those. If you opt out of all of those, your numbers of unwanted calls and unwanted mail should fall off significantly. But familiarize yourself with the rules for that, because if you've done business with a company there, then that establishes a relationship, and and they can send you stuff unsolicited unless you tell them specifically not to. So let's go to the next slide, Ann. So some of the other scams that we see in the technical type of community, the employment scams, what we'll do is find that anybody that will try to offer you a job, especially now that jobs are, work is going up and people are getting more jobs. A lot of times people will be told that there's a job out here, but you need to pay us some money to get access to the list or whatever. Scammers will post bogus job openings targeting veterans so they can get their personal information on the job application for identity theft. They also do scams where they will enlist you to be a forwarder or a freight expediter or some fancy title that in reality what you're doing is taking in money and going to the bank and cash in checks or doing some, putting money in your account and writing a check against it, and you lose that way too, because the checks that you get to deposit will always bounce. So just be very, very careful if you're dealing, you or your spouse is looking to get a job, and you see one of these ads, or you see an email, or you see a text, especially those that federal jobs that have been hidden or that they're unknown to everybody else or not previously disclosed. You need to be very, very careful about that. And don't ever pay for a list, or don't ever pay things up front for a job like that. Next slide, please, Ann. Another one of the scams that we face specifically as part of the veteran community is what's called the benefits buyout. Now, this is where a company will seek out a veteran who may need money, who may be having cash flow problems, and they'll say, look, we know you're a veteran. We'll give you, we know you've got your retirement. We may have a VA disability, and we know that this is going to go on for a while, but you want that money now. So we'll offer you a upfront payment of cash. We'll give you, $50,000 in exchange for this percentage of your future disability or retirement payments. Unfortunately, this is typically a fraction of the value that your actual benefit will get, and you won't get a very good return on your cents on the dollar at best. And while these may not necessarily be illegal, they certainly take unfair advantage of us and our fellow veterans, because if they need some quick cash, they'll dangle this cash. And again, like Paul talked about, they'll have this sense of urgency. You've got to do this now. Money's going away. We've got a program right now that will expire tomorrow at midnight. You've got to apply right now, trying to get that sense of urgency and that sense of heightened emotional state to get you wanting, let's make you overcome some of the things that second thoughts you might be having in your back of your mind. The best way you can learn the truth about this type of thing is go to the VA website, benefits.va.gov, and the /pension, and it will talk about the value of your benefits, or you can call that number 800-827-1000 for the VA. Next slide. Now, this is moving scams are one of those things that most of us, when we were in the military, didn't have to worry about, because when you PCS or PC8, I guess the Navy called it, the government paid for it. The government packed you up, and unless you didn't go over your weight allowance, you didn't see a bill. But now that we've all, if you've moved out of the military, or you've retired and you're on your own doing moves, that's a stressful time. That's one of the biggest stressful times, moving into a new home and into a new community. Even though we've all done it a lot as veterans, there's a lot of stress and anxiety, even in the most hardened of us. You're going to a new environment, maybe going to a new job, you've lost, you've said goodbye to your friends in your old house, so that causes you stress. But you need to make sure that if you're responsible for your moving company, you need to make sure that your checklist of things to do includes researching your options pretty carefully, making sure that movers that you get are listed by the Better Business Bureau. They have a good rating. Every moving company in the U.S. has got to register with the Department of Transportation, the Motor Carrier Safety Act Administration, and they have basically a search tool online. You see the link there, that if you've been approached by folks that say, hey, we're a moving company, go online and see if they're actually registered as a mover, because some of the things that they will do is they'll give you, they'll have really ads for really cheap moving options, online or in print. And especially if you start searching for movers and such, those things will start popping up on your computer. But an affordable mover is not going to give you an estimate over the phone without coming to your home and looking at it. A reputable one, even during the pandemic, would figure out a way through video or through some way to see exactly what you have, because they're not in it for the fast buck. They're in it to do a quality job. If they require a large deposit in advance or payment up front, be very, very, very careful about that, because there are lots of stories out there of companies that basically have held, have gotten a partial payment up front or a full payment in advance. And then suddenly out of nowhere, the contract, they pull out the contract and say, well, you have goods that we didn't include in the contract, so you owe us another $10,000. Or you have, we have moved for you goods that are hazardous cargo, or that are electronics, or that are those things that weren't specifically talked about in the contract, and you owe them more money. That's what we call a hostage load, because what they'll do, they'll jack up the price and might even refuse delivery. They might even say, look, we're not going to give you your stuff until you pay more money. And once, as you might imagine, once a mover has your stuff on their truck or in their warehouse, they hold the cards. You have a whole lot of leverage. You don't have a whole lot of leverage when that happens. So please register. Please check the registered movers at that website there. If there's no registration, don't give them the contract. Next slide. Fake charities are something that we all have to be watching out for, whether you're a veteran or not, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic world that we've just lived through. There was lots and lots of activities in the charity world, but our community makes us kind of a special case in terms of vulnerability to fake charities, because there's lots of lots of fraudsters who will stick the word veteran in the name of their fake charity, because or they'll use a name that really closely resembles a real charity, and leverage people who just make a mistake and mistake them for the legitimate charity. And I can tell you, when I first started dealing with AARP, when I lived in Tennessee, and I started doing their work in their veterans program, I looked and tried to get an idea in my naivete of how many veterans organizations and veterans charities there were there. And I was astounded. I mean, there was over 100 just in the state of Tennessee that people have, little bitty charities that one or two people had gotten together and formed a nonprofit. And so, no telling how many of them were legitimate and how many weren't. But it's really hard to kind of understand and get to the bottom of whether a charity or a military organization, a veterans organization, is legitimate or not. There's a couple of things you can do to give you some input. Washington State's Attorney General's has registered charities on their website. There's CharityWatch.org and CharityNavigator.org are two places that you can go to look up their ratings, to see how much of the dollars that are given goes to the charity and how much goes to the administrative or overhead or paying the CEO. And just make sure you do some legitimacy research on charities if you're going to give to a charity, whether it's veteran related or not, because those types of charities are out there and they will take your money gladly, and they're making a lot of money, and many of them not doing very much for our community, for the veteran community, even though they're leveraging us as veterans. So Paul, tell us about ways to stay ahead of the scammers.
And before you do that, Paul, just a 10-minute note that we have 10 more minutes in the section.
Okay, wow, gotta go. Okay, move on. Well, now that we've seen that we have this fraudulent and scam activities out there, what can we do to stay ahead of it? How can we protect ourselves from these people? And I will tell you, the basic best approach is to be prepared. That's our best defense against them. You know, it's like they're knocking on doors, they're trying to get into your house. Well, the fewer houses they get into, the fewer of them there will be, because they just aren't making the money. So the more prepared we are to learn how to avoid scams and how to avoid fraudulent activity, they will eventually, that'll shrink the industry, and there'll be a lot fewer of them. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we can avoid being sucked into their pitch. And I can remember when I first started doing the Fraud Watch program at AARP, we talked a lot about they were setting up booths in front of grocery stores, in front of malls, where they would walk up and hand out they had the professional looking brochures, etc., and they were really not legitimate charities. Well, now in this world, they've moved into the social media world and the internet. So they're doing the same things, but in a different format. So when you when you look at what we're dealing with, as I mentioned to you before, they're going to sound very credible. They work hard at this. They learn a lot of things about what they're doing, and they will sound very credible, and they will know just enough information about you that you think that they're legitimate. So and they're going to create an environment. They want a compelling reason for you to do business with them right now. And so they're going to create that environment. So the very first thing we need to do is just go slow. Don't make any financial decisions or make any decisions to donate when you're in a heightened emotional state. Slow down. Do your research. I mean, certainly there's more and more activity that we run into through bogus emails and through texts sending us to another site, and through social media, that make these organizations seem like they're real. Well, they're not, and we need to stop and do our homework before we do any investing. And the most important thing, I think, is just learn how to say no. Okay. I mean, it's very easy. Some people, especially because there's a lot of social isolation out there now. We're just not interacting with our friends and other people, and we're not working at the offices anymore. We're working out of our house. And so we tend to think, you know, gee, I want to answer that robocall just because I want to talk to somebody. Well, we can't do that, and we have to really develop the script and a way for us just to say no. A simple no thank you works. Next slide, please. Also, identity, we talked a little bit about identity theft, you know, and I have to go back again. This is for those of us that have been doing this for a while. I can remember when we went into organizations and clubs, and we would do these presentations face to face. I can remember so many times at the end of the presentation, people would come up to me and they said, well, I don't have any money. What would they care about me? They don't want me. So, you know, this doesn't really apply to me. In their world, they didn't think they had enough money to be a candidate. Well, I can guarantee you we are all candidates, regardless of how much money we have, what our investments are, and what we do for a living, or who we are. So the sensitive information and documents lead to identity theft. And I can tell you that is the number one concern of most organizations, is that we fall for that. So sensitive information and documents, we have to take special care of. Shred your documents with private sensitive information. Shred them. Use strong passwords. I have just recently gone through to do stop my credit reports, and I'm now monitoring my bills and my financial accounts several times a week. I talk a lot about this because I think it's so important. Go to your banks, go to your financial institutions, ask them to tell you what they do with your information. Have them tell you how they protect your information. What if they do? What did they do? What does your bank do if something comes across that's somebody trying to get into your account with a fraudulent activity? How do they protect you from that? And if you don't like what you hear, go find a new bank. Go find a new financial institution, because whatever you're doing and however well they are managing your account is only as good as they protect it. So that's one of the first things that we need to be careful of. So, and make sure that you are protected. Make sure that your own devices have internet services to protect you from it. Next slide, please. And the guy who's the most expert on passwords, because he confuses me every time he brings it up, is Dave.
Everybody wants to know what's the things they can do to protect themselves online. I've been doing this for many, many, many years in cybersecurity. The most important thing to do when you're online is your passwords. They've been around forever, but they're still our best way to protect our individual accounts. Each one of your accounts should have an individual password. It shouldn't be an easily guessed or a recognizable English language word. It ought to be, have some unique special characters, numbers, and you should keep those in a safe place. There's things called password managers. We can't go into those now, but we have a Fraud Watch Fridays presentations on Friday afternoons that we talk about things like that. So please tap into those things. But passwords are your main way online, the most effective way online to maintain your safety. Because they're old, because the technology has been around a long time, we have what we call multi-factor or two-factor authentication, which augments your password. It doesn't replace it. It adds to, and this is where banks do it already by law. You have your user ID and your password, and then you have a number that a 4-digit number that they'll text you to your phone that you have to put in there. That's just another way of making sure that you are really you. It may be a phone, it may be another factor, maybe your thumbprint or facial recognition. Or the secret questions, which we don't really like in the security community because they're easily found out on social media. But those set that up wherever it's available. And most of the social media and all of the banks have that available, and many other companies are offering two-factor authentication now. So wherever that's offered, accept that and take a little time and figure out a good way to augment those passwords you have. Look at your social media accounts, make sure that you know what data is being placed at wide open to the world, and look at the privacy settings on whatever social media, LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or whatever you use, because they change often. Every time they do a major update, sometimes they will reset the privacy information. You have to go in there and check it again. Have a good antivirus. Most Apple and Microsoft computers have antivirus built in, but make sure you have a good one. And oftentimes you can have a second one without any problem. So you may want to even add a second one. And then remember, don't use your computer or phone even on public Wi-Fi, like at Starbucks or at the hotel Wi-Fi networks, or in the airport or train or whatever. Public Wi-Fi is usually not encrypted. So be very, very careful about doing sensitive work. I mean, you can play solitaire or whatever on Wi-Fi, but you need to make very, very sure that you're very careful about what types of transactions you do, because they're not encrypted and they are reasonably easy to intercept. Next slide. And so we've got several free resources that are out there to help you fight fraud. We've got there's really, next slide there. let's talk about some of the other things. Safeguarding your social security number is the top 5 things you can do, really. Safeguarding your social security number, your DD14 and other sensitive documents, protecting your information online and in the mail. Shredders are a great investment, let me tell you. Monitor your bills and your financial accounts on a regular basis, and go into to your credit record, credit history, and put a freeze on your credit history or your credit record, so that no new credit can be taken out in your name without you knowing about it. And check that credit report. You can do it annually anytime at annualcreditreports.com, but you also can do it now weekly up until April 22nd of next year. So check your credit report to make sure nobody is getting credit in your name. Again, annualcreditreport.com, and secure any kind of personal information and passwords in those types of tools that we have, like password managers. There's some areas that we have for support for us as veterans. AARP.org/veterans has a lot of information on veterans and fraud related to it. Fraud in general, the Fraud Watch Network, I mentioned it earlier tonight. AARP.org/fraud watch network, all kinds of, all one word. And if you or anybody in your family, you don't have to be an AARP member to take advantage of this. Think you've been targeted by a scam or a fraud, it's happened to you and you want to know what next steps to take, or if you are just concerned about something that's going on and your little antenna are kind of twittering and you don't really understand what's happening, but you think it might be a fraud, or you want to report that you've had a fraud, call us. We have a Fraud Watch Network helpline where you can talk to trained people who understand fraud and can give you some steps to go forward from being a victim if you're a victim. 877-908-3360 is the number. And we take calls from all age groups, from all types of people. So if your friends or your kids or your grandkids have been victims of frauds, they can call also. So thanks for listening to us talk about the veterans scams. I'm going to turn it over to Rafael, and he's going to give you an overview of our benefits as Washington State residents.
Thank you so much. Thank you, AARP, for having given me the opportunity to present to you on behalf of your Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs. That briefing on fraud is huge. It's something that hits home with us at the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs, because we hear the stories. We get those. We get that we have a population that is easily targeted. So I would like to take the next 20-30 minutes or so, giving you a high altitude view of what your Washington State Department of Veterans does for you. We don't charge for anything. That is the key thing when it comes to benefits and entitlements. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to take a little bit of brief time talking about these subjects: the veterans' homes, which is the foundation of the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs, meaning that that's how we started being an agency. We will talk about State Veteran Cemetery, the Veteran Service, our Veteran Services, Counseling and Wellness, and state benefits to wrap it all up with. And then after that, we will go into the Q&As. Next slide, please. So what we got going here from the very beginning was to provide services to Washingtonians that were the aging population, right? And so the way that the agency started, we were attached actually to DSHS. We were part of DSHS way back in the day. And we opened up 3 veterans homes, and till 2 years ago, we opened up our 4th veterans home. And as you can see in the slide, our veterans homes are long-term care, meaning that they meet all the requirements, all the qualifications for providing long-term care. And to a certain degree, we deal with issues of, mental issues that the veterans or the elderly might be going through. The key thing to remember about our homes is that we do not have a lockdown ward, or what we call neighborhood. So it is a long-term care home. We have all the amenities. If you can look at that slide, And then we mirror in many ways and exceed in some other ways your standard homes out there that provide services to the aging community. The big takeaway from this slide is, number one, if you are a disabled veteran who is 70% or greater rated as a service-connected disability, the federal VA will pick up the tab to live in to provide the cost of living in our homes. Or if the reason for your disability for that long-term care service is linked to service-connected disability, then the care provided for you is done by the federal VA in regards to the cost. One of the things that comes up often is, how do I qualify? What are those things that make me qualify to be admitted into our state homes? And it's very simple, pretty straightforward. One of the straightforward things is have served in the military at any time, and for our state homes includes guard and reservists. Have had an honorable discharge, right? Reside in Washington State, be the spouse, that's what's really cool, the spouse or widow of a veteran. And the last thing that was added a year ago, and this year we had the first member, is be a Gold Star parent. And for those of you who don't know what a Gold Star parent is, a parent who has lost a son or daughter during this war and terror during combat. Next slide, please. So in addition to those homes that we have what is called transitional housing. And the transitional housing program was designed to bring veterans without homes, bring them off the streets, clean them up. It's a 2-year program. They sign, the veteran signs a contract with us. A caseworker is assigned to him or her. And after 2 years, that veteran is able to go right back into the community and be able to take care of him or herself. One of the things about the program is that gives the veteran all the necessary tools to be successful at the end of the program. So that includes processing the claim, and usually it's almost always the case. Usually when we encounter a veteran who has no home, who is drifting out there without a home, there's some kind of service-connected disability that kind of triggers that, or it has something to do with something that is service that causes that instability. So we provide that claims assistance, we provide the counseling, we provide the casework for employment, an avenue for employment, whether it's an internship or temporary on-the-job training, and then have them ready for at the end of the two years, have them ready to go back and get back on their feet. So I mentioned that we have this transitional housing program that you can see in the slides. Well, one of the things that is unique as part of the transitional housing program is that we have 10 beds in our Roosevelt barracks over in Orting that are dedicated for female veterans and only female veterans, because we discovered that some of our female veterans do not want to be in the same location as males for whatever reason, and more specifically addressing military sexual trauma. And in addition to that, we just came up, we built 35 tiny homes. Actually, they were built by Quixote Village, which is famous throughout the state of Washington for doing this kind of work. They communicated with us, they built the 35 tiny homes. So now, in addition to having that 2-year program to where the veteran goes through the program and goes back into the community, if that veteran is not ready to go back in the community and wants to stay within the shelter, have that comfort of being around other veterans and the services close by, those services close by, they can get into our tiny villages into the tiny village and get into one of those tiny homes and continue with the program available for him or her till they get back on their feet mentally and economically. Next slide, please. So in our wisdom, we serve the whole state of Washington, right? And I mentioned that we started our program with the WDVA program with our homes. We have homes all over the state of Washington, one in Port Orchard, one in Ording, one in Spokane, and one in Walla Walla. In addition to that, we have what is called Veterans Cemetery, a state veteran cemetery in Eastern Washington to try to cover the rest of the state. A lot of us know, or if you didn't know, we have what is called Mount Tahoma National Cemetery, which is managed by the federal VA on this side of the state, but we didn't have anything on the east side. And so through the grace and through the gift of the federal VA, they gave us, the state gave the state some federal property in Eastern Washington, and we built the cemetery at Medical Lake, and it mirrors very closely what the National Cemetery does. That includes the requirements for being admitted into the cemetery and all the policy protocols. One of the things that I like to plug in right now in regards to the cemetery and at this time for the Transitional Housing Program is this plates that you see at the bottom of your slide. The bottom of the slide is showing that we have Washington State plates with your veteran status on them, right? Those plates are sold by the Department of Licensing, and $28 out of each plate that is sold goes to managing our funds to manage our cemetery and to manage our homeless veterans reintegration program, transitional housing program. Next slide, please. So this is where I come in. This is what I am all about, and it's veteran services. So our veteran services is that, you know, I'm a little biased about this because I'm part of it, but our veteran services is what you call boots on ground. We are the infantry of the WDVA. We are the ones that go out there and find the veteran, find the family member, and take care of their needs. One of the things that is unique about us as the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs, unlike the federal Department of Veterans Affairs, is that we deal with all the potentially available benefits for a veteran in the state and in the federal spectrum, right? So when I was introduced, it was mentioned that I was going to be talking about county, state, and federal benefits. In addition to that, our network goes beyond those county, state, and federal benefits because we also collaborate very closely with organizations that provide services to veterans. And as you look in here into this slide, we have what we call veterans benefits specialists. They are a little different than the VSOs. They are known out there for the federal VA, which is veteran service officers. We are veterans benefits specialists. And what that means is we do all things that are necessary to find a service and provide that guidance and those tools. And in many instances, do the paperwork for the veteran with not just federal benefits. We have 41 of these service officers located throughout the state of Washington. And how do you find out where they're located? Very simple. You can reach out to me. That's what I do. Meaning that that email, that information will be available to you. Or you can go to our website, bookmark our website, and that information was at the beginning of the slide presentation. It's going to be at the end of the slide presentation. And in our website, you can find out. You can query veteran service officer, and he'll give you the location. We have two ways of going about finding the location. We actually have a county map, the map of the state of Washington, and you can click on the county, or you can go into and do a type research. You go ahead and do the typing query and filter by the county and the benefit that you're looking for. So our website has a wealth of information. I am responsible for maintaining and updating the services out there, along with a couple of other people. I just don't do this alone. But what I'm trying to say is a very reliable tool that you can use to find out about our benefits that you are going to be seeing from now on in the next few slides. So like I said, we have 41 service officers throughout the state. We have also what is called, it is a lot different than the transitional housing program. We have what is called the Veterans Reintegration Program. And what's different about the two is that one is about having a facility there for veterans. They are without homes. The transitional housing program is case-based and has a location for the veteran. The Veterans Reintegration Program is case-based, but the veteran is out there in the community. And we try to collaborate with those organizations that provide services for the veteran. In addition to that, we do the case management. Next slide, please. So in addition to that, we have what is called the Veterans Integration Program, and these funds available for veterans. It was designed initially it was put together by the legislature to get some money, a chunk of money for veterans who were serving after 9/11. And more specifically, Guard and reservists that went and did backfill positions overseas and went out there and deployed, and then left their jobs behind and had a big change in salary, right? Went overseas, did their time, provided the service to our nation, came back, and all of a sudden they had to get back on their feet economically, whether it was to get that first paycheck right back when they came back and got their job back. The money didn't flow right in. They had to be a time of service, a time of work to get that payment. Or were those who came back and started going back to college, waiting for that GI Bill money to come in. So that VIP program was designed for that, to give them a chunk of money free of charge to let them get back on their feet. And what has happened as of COVID-19, more specifically as of mid last year, that program, the integration program, expanded to all veterans, not just veterans from the war on terror. So now we have the legislature is allowing us to take applicants that are in need of assistance, who are transitioning into their job, going back into the job, going back, trying to get back on their feet, and give them a little money till they get that paycheck back. We also have a Washington State Military Transition and Readiness Council. The council was designed more specifically to provide services to spouses of active duty personnel. And one of the things that we found out, more specifically, the Department of Defense found out, is that a lot of the folks were getting out of active duty because their spouses, they could not afford first of all, they could not afford to live at the income rate that they had in another state when they got deployed or relocated back to Washington State. The income changed if the spouse was a nurse, or if the spouse was a pipe fitter or an electrician, came back to Washington or got stationed here, and all of a sudden they had to get recertified or get that certification or that licensing, and that was a problem. They could not make that money; those funds happen. So a lot of divorce took place. Divorces were just not a good thing, and veterans were active duty folks were choosing to become veterans to protect, to save their marriages. So in our wisdom, we adopted this program, Washington State Military Transition and Readiness Council, and then we're working that is in our front burner. We just hired a person that started in May of this year, and the focus is on working this puzzle, this maze of how to get licensing and certification done so the spouse can be successful and still bring that income to their home. Next slide, please. So veteran service continues, transitional warrior program at JBLM. That's a little bit before we, now we're looking at before we were talking about retention. Now we're talking about, okay, the folks have decided to either retire, have been medically discharged, or have served their time in getting out. So we have at JBLM, embedded within JBLM, some folks that will provide all the necessary tools and the necessary knowledge for those folks who are separating from active duty. So when they get out, they don't have to be wondering what's next. And that includes claims assistance, that includes employment assistance, that includes understanding about the community, all those services around the community for them, and making it easier for them to transition into our state, and hopefully we'll retain him, right? That's the whole idea. The whole idea is to keep them and not lose them. A statewide apprenticeship coordinator program that goes right in tandem with the JBLM transitional warrior program. So we expanded from that transitional warrior program into the apprenticeship program, which is blooming. To when we realized when Obama was elected, we realized that veterans, not all veterans want to get a degree, and if they did, they didn't know what to do with a degree. Higher education is not for everybody. And we realized that blue collar workers are just as successful economically and as productive into a society. Not even that, not only that, that we're losing, a lot of those folks who are in blue collar jobs are retiring. And then there's been a lot of gaps in that in fields of the blue collar workforce. So the apprenticeship program has taken that on and is blooming as we speak. Next slide, please. So we have, I'm going to do very briefly. Oh, I'm doing great on time. Very briefly, we have what is called fiduciary services, which is also known as the Veteran State Management Program. And it mirrors the Social Security program, in which we take veterans and family members who can't manage their affairs, right? Who are having some trouble, whatever that trouble is. Some of those issues are cognitive issues, but they still can stay at home. And some of the issues are drug addiction or self-medication. And they get awarded fiduciary services through the state or through the VA. Through Social Security or through the VA. And then those fiduciary services provide for them all the necessary support so they don't end up on the street. So we take them and we take care of them and try to keep their lives, keep them afloat, keep their lives going, to include investments and all those things. We become their parents, right? So to speak. So we have that program in place. At this time, we have 332 folks in our program with us. We also have an LGBTQ plus veteran outreach coordinator that I work closely with, and is trying to get the understanding and the message out there and the cultural competencies, so we can be more and more inclusive. In addition to that, we have what is called call centers and services hub. Like I mentioned, we provide all kinds of information, and it's not just information about state, county, and federal benefits. I know about organizations. We know about organizations that are trustworthy, reliable, and they can provide services to veterans. And we try all the time, as much as we can, to do a warm handoff. So as part of those hubs, we have where I work at, which is also known as the central office, is the Olympia Service Center right here at Quinn Street. We have a King County office, which is attached to King County, and we collaborate very closely. By the way, we collaborate very closely with all counties in the state of Washington. And in some instances, we're co-located with them. In this case, King County, we are not necessarily co-located in King County. They just broke up so we could cover King County. King County is so large that we found that it was more beneficial to those folks from King County to have us separate and us being able to cover a larger real estate. We have Building 10, like I mentioned, which is one of the part of the Transitional Housing Program. And I mentioned that we file claims and everything that has to do with getting those benefits for the veteran. So we do have a service center there. We have a co-located, in this case, it is co-located, a Spokane Regional Veteran Service Center, which we collaborate very closely with Spokane County. And then to keep ourselves in touch with the federal VA, we have VA regional office. We are located, have an office at the VA regional office in Seattle, and we have a back door, if you will, to try to go and get some time with our coaches, with the VA coaches and our claims assistance folks, to try to resolve some of these difficult problems that sometimes come up, that we need to have that face-to-face with the federal VA to help our veterans send their claims. Next, please. And counseling and wellness, again, we have 34 counselors at this time. We have gone as high as 54. So we are a little short. This COVID thing has done a lot of major shifting. We do have, we pay 34 counselors throughout the state of Washington. These counselors do everything for free. And if you need to find out where a counselor is located, where do you go? Our website, to our resources, to whether you want to click on a county map location or do the actual search. We do training. At this time, our training is expanding like crazy. I'm happy to say that I'm part of that training. And it was initially started by King County and a King County grant, but we decided, the legislature has seen the benefit of it, and we are going for grant money and expanding that training to include peer training. That is a whole different presentation. I can spend many hours about the peer training program that is literally having veterans, helping veterans who are in need. So in addition to that, we have the special programs. We have traumatic acquired brain injury. That program is growing as we speak. We're hiring 2 additional case workers, managers for the traumatic brain injury. That's going to put us at 4. 2 years ago, we were just 1. Veterans Peer Corps is a program that's been around for quite a while, and is veterans who are embedded on higher education in colleges and universities, who provide navigation and mentoring for those veterans who are going, and family members who are trying to navigate the higher education world. And another program that is fairly new and is growing is suicide prevention. We started with 1 2 years ago. Now we're going to 4, most likely 5 is a high priority with our governor. Next slide, please. And then I mentioned peer-to-peer veterans programs. I'm running out of time, and that's another conversation. But the peer-to-peer kind of takes a veteran and gets them out of the shell, gets them out of the house, gets them out of isolation, and provides them with ways of getting involved within the community, provides a guidance and a mentorship. In addition to that, we have the Veterans Conservation Corps, which has taken the idea, which is not new, the idea of medication and sitting behind, sitting in a room on a chair facing a counselor, and taking counseling to a different level and getting out there into the world of the environment, to where they can get their hands dirty, getting out there in the world and getting wet, getting the feel for life, and getting that feeling, that desire to do something, for get them out of the house and get them out of their heads and do something other than just sit there and thinking about things. Next slide, please. And this is a snapshot. Below is a really cool YouTube that we don't have time to watch, but this is our 30-acre plot that is growing. If you look to the right of the slide, we're growing in that direction. Those are Christmas trees. That's we have veterans who are learning how to farm, and is getting their hands dirty, learning all the basic steps and all the tools necessary to be successful farmers or growers, and it's a very successful program. And next slide, please. So state benefits. So when you look at the state benefits, I want you to remember me saying about the disability rating. So reduced fishing and hunting, if you're 30% or higher, you will get a reduction on your fishing and hunting license. State and federal parks passes, again, 30% or higher. Reduced public transportation fees, disabled veterans, 40% or higher in some areas of the state that has that program. Not all the counties have that program. Tuition reduction in public colleges and universities, 50% tuition reduction for veterans who have served during wartime period, 100% tuition reduction for dependents of 100% disabled veterans, free license plates for 100% disabled veterans, reduced property taxes for veterans 80%, rated 80% or higher, state park passes, disabled veterans 30%, or if a veteran is 65 years of age, he or she is entitled to that state parks passes reduction on fishing and the national passes are for any veteran. So a national park pass is available for veterans throughout the United States. And the last thing I want to close with is my personal pet peeve is I handle a DD214 database. If a veteran got discharged after 1995 from any branch of the service except for the Coast Guard, I will most likely be able to get the DD214 within 48 hours. If a veteran got discharged from World War II, Korea, or Vietnam, and apply for the war bonus here in the state of Washington, their information is in the state archives, so I will be able to find their certificate of discharge or the DD214 from the state archives if they got discharged in Washington and apply for the war bonus. And last thing I want to say is that the counties have their own benefits, the County Assistance Fund, and all counties have allocated some money out of levy that puts money aside just for veterans out of their County Assistance Fund and county services. And with that, please next slide. That's my contact information and the contact information for my agency. And last slide, please. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And I think for all of us in the audience, it's really clear that our three presenters today are really committed to the work that they do. And we thank you very much for all that you have presented so well. And so as I'm looking into the chat box, I do not see any questions in there, but I'm wondering if there's anyone in the audience who has a question. And if you do, you could unmute yourself and just ask directly. Do we have any questions? Or you could type it into the chat box and I could read it, but it would probably be quicker if you just asked. Well, while you're deciding about it, I will mention that there are many ways that you can reach AARP. We're on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. All of this information will be provided to you, as will Rafael's from the Washington State Department of Veteran Affairs. So you're going to have all of these opportunities to contact us in the future. You don't need to write these down. Okay, so Rafael, this looks like a question for you. Dennis to everyone, replace a lost DD214.
So question is how to replace the DD214?
I think so. Dennis, did you want to clarify, please? Do you want to know how to do it? Or would you like for Rafael to repeat what he said, or is it outside those parameters?
So I can help real quick because
Okay.
it's a pretty good question, because there's one thing we didn't cover. It was mentioned by all of us, but we didn't cover. So like I mentioned, if you were discharged in 1995 or later out of any branch of the service except for the Coast Guard, we can find that through the DoD database that I have access to. If you served prior to 1995 and you do not have your DD214, the best way to get that DD214 is go to the National Archives. And that is just Google that, National Archives, make sure that you click on it. Like it was mentioned earlier, you are not going to pay for this thing. It's free of charge. And you can't confuse the National Archives. It's very legit. When you go in there, it's going to ask you some questions. in regards to what is it that you want to do. You can do a lot of requests. If you know anything, excuse me, forgive me, if you have been watching the news, a lot of records have been requisitioned about this January 6th from the National Archives. That's the same National Archives that have been used by Congress to requisition records. So go to the National Archives. Now, if you were discharged from World War II, Korea, or Vietnam, and you apply for the war bonus here in Washington State, then we can find that DD214, or in most cases, what is called prior to Vietnam, a certificate of discharge from the state archives, and I can get that.
Thank you.
That's only for those that applied for that bonus. Is that correct?
Yeah, you have to have applied for that bonus.
Okay. How, any idea what the time frame is going through National Archives?
Yes, sir. If you were not discharged in Washington, and the other states might have different ways of doing. Oh, I want to add. There's another. Wait. There's one more way. If you are service connected, if you apply for VA benefits and you are service connected, then the VA will have that DD214. So how do you go about getting that DD214? The VA is not in the business of releasing that, but whoever helped you file that claim might be able to help you, because out of their wisdom, they keep copies of your application for your claim. So if you use the VFW, American Legion, Vietnam Veterans of America, whatever, they might have a record of your application, and they might be able to provide you with that DD214.
And Rafael, one of Dennis's follow-up questions was, if you do go to the National Archives, do you have an idea how long it would take to get the DD214?
Yeah, they're getting, depending with how urgent it is. If you are homeless or close to, if this is an end of life issue, they expedite things a little bit. But right now they're still going through this COVID-19 issue, and they're backlogged. So the best way to find an answer is to go to the National Archives, and there's a phone number in there you can call them. But get that request into the National Archives and follow up with a phone call. But if there's an issue to where you need that DD214 and it's an urgent matter, have that conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is, if you're trying to file a claim with the VA and it's holding you back from that DD214 or that certificate of discharge is holding you back from filing that claim, don't. Go ahead and file the claim, get that claim, that date of the claim in the system, and then let the VA know that you are trying to get that DD214 and provide information to the VA to allow them to get that DD214 themselves as well.
No, it used to be you got your 214 at the end of each service period. And if you re-enlisted, now do you just get one for your whole military service?
No, that's another good question. No, you could have several. So I've seen people with four of them. Yeah, so there could be several DD214s for you in there.
And it's still a standard form 180 to fill out for National Personnel Record Center?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Rafael. Thank you. And thank you, Dennis, for posing those questions. I'm sure other people have questions about it too. We're just about ready to wrap up, and I don't see any questions in the chat box. So Anne, could you help us share with our audience what our other topics are? So we want to share that AARP Washington has other presentations that we regularly do. You can learn about these on the website, or if you are with a group and you would like to have this information presented to your group, we're happy to do that as well. One of them is brain health. And this is really looking at 6 pillars of things that we can do so that we can better ensure healthy, functioning brains as we age. So things like nutrition, and I know it was brought up in our talk today, but social connections, getting enough sleep, those kinds of things all contribute to brain health. And this talk will help us with information that will promote that.
home fit, what can we do so that we can age in place, things that we can think about in advance. So if the time comes and we need additional services, we'll have them ready. Living longer, living smarter. This helps us prepare for our future days. Again, what can we do so that we will be able to better access services, helps us learn more about resources, and better prepare again. So as we're aging, and prepare to care is actually a talk that helps us prepare in being caregivers, because many of us will be caregivers. Maybe we already are for parents or for a spouse. And this helps us understand some of the things that we will be facing when we take on that role. We all want to be the best we can, of course, in those really important roles that we have in life. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I particularly want to thank our volunteers and our speakers. And you will be receiving information via email that will share information that that you saw today, both from AARP and from the Washington State Department of Veteran Affairs. And thank you for joining us.
Thank
And
you.
if you would like to leave, there's a little red button in the lower right of your screen if you move your cursor around, and that will help you exit the program.